Irma Stern realized quite early on in her career that the subject of the still life offers many more creative and expressive possibilities than, say, subjects such as figure studies or portraits do. A newspaper article in The Star reports that it was at her 1930 exhibition in Paris, while hanging her pictures, that she had difficulty in giving a total expression of her work without repeating her color schemes. The brown bodies of the sitters, with orange, red and green, were domineering colors in her canvases, and this made her think that her palette was limited, except for a few still lifes in which she saw a wealth of color scheme, and on those still lifes she determined to build up her work. The present lot is undoubtedly testimony to the success she achieved in and through her still life paintings. The still life not only provided an opportunity for formal experimentation, it also acted as visual metaphors for the abundance and fecundity of life, but also of the transience of life. The vessel and the cloth on which it stands can be considered as permanent, but the flowers, the obvious transient element in the work, certainly are dominating the picture plane in this magnificent work. Stern took to gardening immediately after buying a house, The Firs, in Capel Road, Rosebank in Cape Town in 1927. She lists the flowers being cultivated in a garden in a letter to a good friend, Trudy Bosse. Larkspur, stocks, enormous geraniums, all shades of pelargoniums, great balls of white and also yellow daisies, violet and yellow poppies, sunflowers and many, many roses, carnations, petunias, fuchsias. Christopher Peter, longtime director of the Irma Stern Museum for over 40 years, adds to the list zinnias and delphiniums. Although not mentioned in these lists, the amaryllis flower, depicted in the present lot, was also a very popular indigenous plant cultivated as cut flowers in local gardens in the 1940s and 50s, and it is likely that Stern also tried her hand at growing them. Debunking the myth that Stern only painted flowers from her own garden, Christopher Peter points out that her garden was cold, shady and tricky, maintaining that she in all likelihood bought specialist flowers such as dahlias and chrysanthemums from the flower sellers along Adderley Street in the city centre. Given the fact that these flower sellers routinely stocked arum lilies growing wild along the many streams and ponds in the Western Cape, and that the amaryllis also grows wild in similar conditions, it is also likely that Stern could have bought bunches of these amaryllis from them as well. The vase containing the flower is more accurately described as a late 19th century Chinese storage jar, a so-called martaban, with inflated body and heavy blackish brown glaze. One of 10 other martabani in Stern's vast collection of artifacts, well documented in an extensive inventory of her holdings when her house became a museum in 1971. Stern collected these artifacts and cultural objects from all over the world, from the Caledonian Market in Islington, London, where, for example, in 1937 she ran into South African artist Edward Wolff, to the barber shops along Long Street in Cape Town, where passing sailors often traded or bartered or exchanged exotic wares. It is more likely, however, that Stern bought them on one of her visits to the island of Zanzibar in 1939 and in 1945. Describing the bazaar in Stone Town on the island in her travelogue called Zanzibar, published in 1948, she mentions not only the fresh produce and the fresh fish, but also the abundant spices and the ivory and the gold and silver traded there, as well as textiles and ceramics. Her matabani, in all likelihood, part of what is called a lamu pottery, Chinese ware specifically made for the Arab market. Zanzibar at the time flourished as the confluence of trade routes from the Far East, the Middle East, and from Africa. The cloth on which the mataban is placed significantly echoes the patterning and colors of the flowers, conjoining all in a celebration of tones and textures. Scanning through the inventory of textiles in the Irma Stern Museum, with examples from the America, Africa, the Middle and Far East, it is likely that this particular cloth was a Javanese example from Indonesia. judging from the description of it in terms of its geometric designs of squares and star shapes. Combining a very specific flower, container and cloth, such as in this still life, suggests that Stern had infinite possibilities at her disposal, using different flowers grown in a garden or bought on the street, placing them in one of the vast number of containers or vessels or vases in a collection, and positioning it on one of the many textiles in a collection. Not only did the still life offer Stern the opportunity of experimenting with color, it also provided her with an infinite variety of life.